topic, and we're gonna hear some really interesting information, and I'm hoping that this will actually spawn some really interesting discussions, because the whole issue of augmenting N3C data with clinical information coming from text of all sorts is really incredibly important, and will clearly become even more important as our attention increasingly shifts to long COVID and past, given the sort of broad array of information that needs to be extracted. So from text. So next slide. Okay, so we continue to move forward as an enclave, and we have 56 sites with data released in the N3C enclave, with 42 sites having deposited data in the pipeline. And I don't know if we actually have the numbers here. Last I saw was 1.6 million COVID positive patients. It's probably gone up some since. Next slide, please. So okay, so without further ado, a little further ado, I have to say that at Stony Brook, we have actually gone through the process of running Hongfang's software, and it's been a really very smooth process, and adding that to the Trinetics data feed. I'm not 100% sure whether the concepts that we've extracted have made their way all the way through to people's research pipelines, but if not, it should be very close. And it's really a very it's a very benign process. So Hongfang, I'm going to hand it over to you.
So Oslam, you will advance the slide for me? Okay.
Yes, I will do that.
Okay, so I'm co-presenting with Sija and Emily about this work. So this is truly a teamwork. So all our work has been documented at this GitHub page, and with more details. So there are, on this slide, you can see there are three kind of major activity. One is related to COVID-19 clinical concept glossary, which is related to what are the things we want to find from clinical documents. Secondly, is related to benchmarking and annotation resource. So we do have that also here, but the things we will want to highlight today is mainly on the infrastructure we set up, and so that we actually tested with 4 sites with success kind of processing, and at least 2 to 3 sites have deposited data into N3C Enclave, and we're trying to get more sites onto this. Just 1 hour before, before we come to this meeting, we have a conversation with Trinetics side and try to get the process to be, seamlessly for Trinetics sites to deposit data to the N3C Enclave. Next slide. So why we do, natural language processing or text analytics here, one of the challenges faced in secondary use of electronic health records is related to, a lot of useful information about the clinical encounters is in the text format. The pie chart show the factors contributing to human well-being, where we have social behavior contribute a lot of things to the well-being of the person. And we see this from COVID too, where social determinant health is one of the major factors that determine the outcome related to COVID. So, but those information are not captured very well in structured data. Social determinant of health not captured well. Family history information, we also notice not captured very well. Medical surgical history, and also outcome data, adverse events data. Those are not captured well. In the COVID situation, what we also notice is that emerging concepts, they're not captured well in standards terminology. Like long COVID documents, is that suddenly some of the terms related to non-COVID signs symptoms started to appear in the text documents, but you don't have a codes to associate with those. So we noticed 60 to 80% information in clinical text. Now we noticed the clinical NLP research community as well as the clinical NLP end user community. We have some difference, which basically means if I do a system which be viewed as a simple NLP research, we may not get it published in the journal, but for the end users, can be quite useful information to support their clinical and translational research. And we also face closed source and open source issue. Because NLP is one of the key tooling to support quality improvement, to support clinical decision support, and to support clinical documentation. They have practical contribution to the health sectors with a lot of business potentials. So most of the NLP work systems in the clinical domain, we do end up have a lot of potential commercial opportunities, which is limited the open source community practice related to natural language processing. But meanwhile, for clinical research, we do want the ETL process to be reproducible, transparent, and to the end users. So also the last term as a challenge is the privacy concerns, not like structured data. Even structured data, sometimes we have PHI information, but the clinical documents are full of PHI information. Those are difficult to DID, and even with the latest DID de-identification tool, we still have about 2 to 3% of the information, maybe PHI. And given all this, we are going to the next slide, which is we're hoping there's something, we are promoting open house natural language processing for supporting the clinical and the translational research. The reason we want this to be open science practice is due to the factors listed on this right side. We want the data to be reproducible. We want the transparency to end users. So we need explainability. We also require implementability of the analytics infrastructure. Of course, findable, interoperable, accessible, reusable are also key to ensure the text analytics and NLP solutions can be adopted across the network. Next. So just the team will go to a little bit of detail, but in a snapshot, we're doing modularized NLP implementation, which we modularize the component with the common data models as well as annotation, data models to be standardized so we can adopt a modularized NLP implementation. Next. So modularization have many reasons. EHR system, the clinical data warehouse, we have different regulatory security privacy concern, level of IT support can be quite different. Maturity of clinical data infrastructure service can be different. Secondly, the clinical documentation, the more data size you see, you started to aware we do lack of standardization in clinical documents, and not all documents create equal. So we use the modularized way. So individual sites, if they want to adapt and modify, they can. If they have a full-fledged NLP system themselves, they can also use their own. But for sites without, text analysis capability currently, we are giving end-to-end solutions for the sites to contribute the data, to process NLP, to extract the clinical concepts and then contribute it to the data enclave. Next. This is just to illustrate, the infrastructure actually supporting different kind of NLP pipeline if people want to bring their own. And we do have a common type system developed for clinical NLP back in 2013, which is supporting the interoperability among different NLP modules. And this is also compatible with the standards like FHIR standards. Next. And we also emphasize what we call implementability of the system. This is an article we show that for NLP to be implemented for clinical translational research, we do need to ensure the domain expertise be connected, preserved, and tool sets need to engage and empower domain experts. It's not a simple clinical NLP research, what do we want to do, but more about what the user community want us to do. And sometimes you will require the NLP platforms to be responsive and scalable. So this means the technology we are currently bring to you as an open source is actually a big data technology stack, which can be running with limited resource, can also be running in a very large scale enterprise operation. Next. So some people probably wonder what kind of methods we're using. We actually can accommodate many kind of methods, but we do notice if we, as a baseline for the community, if we want to do statistical NLP approach, we face multiple issues. One is the portability issue of the system. Secondly, the variation of the system can dramatically vary due to their patient population may be different, due to the EHR system used can be different. Also, most important, documentation has a huge variation across different sites. No matter how much we standardize radiology reporting or pathology reporting or clinical documentation, we do have documentation variation, which are practice specific, sometimes even provider specific. We also notice the train a system in a new environment can be quite expensive. Next. So we are doing something which we leverage in which we call crowdsourcing type of approach. Instead of sharing data, we are sharing the NLP knowledge, which institutional domain experts help develop that. So we have a raw engine, demo engine available for people to editing to develop that system. Next. So this is what we envision moving forward. We hope we have OHRP development implementation framework, which allow us to do open, transparent team science collaboration, which allow a different kind of, big or small institutions to adopt a text analysis pipeline. And we want to leverage a crowdsourcing approach to do the NLP algorithm development and the consensus building related to what type of algorithm should we deploy to the network wide. And one potential use case is actually is in the rare disease community. We can talk more about but just to say, this is just one example case which can harvest the network-wide operation to embrace the text analysis capability across a big consortium. Next. I think Sijia will pick on continue the conversation. Sijia?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, my name is Xia Liu. I'm one of Hongfang's team member at Mayo Clinic and also part of the N3C NLP subgroup. So I'm just going to demonstrate the whole N3C NLP workflow in more detail. So with all the components in this diagram. So we do have different type of activities as Hongfang already introduced. So we have corpus development components which can be leveraged later for the NLP algorithm development, which is actually there are several teams contributing data, de-identified data together, and to so we can facilitate the NLP information system, information injection system development. And there are also tracks on how to deploy the existing NLP system into each site, collaborating with EHR system. And for a bigger goal is to continuously contributing data to N3C Enclave. And also there are another component is to for those who are part of the different N3C domains, we would like to also have a system that can be leveraged to better develop the rule-based NLP system. So putting those all together depends on which direction you're going on. So hopefully you may find our workflow somehow helpful. So for the N3C domain teams, so if you're coming with an existing NLP needs, for example, you may have some phenotypes or conditions you would like to address, you may be able to look into our the model development interface, which is essentially a web-based graphical user interface, and to which I think Hongfang already showed a screenshot on. And so you can navigate and to see what the rules can be done, and how the updated rules can take effect on a particular test string. And besides, we are also working with the NLP Sandbox team on providing an open benchmarking system that if we host the data, de-identified data at a public place, so if we can leverage container technology so that there can be a system, for example, MetaGram NLP rule set, and how the performance will that be. So this is a part of the collaboration and also a work in progress. So and also if there's any interest in having an existing rule set as NLP domains, so our team also have a lot of outreaching activities to different COVID-related topics. So we start with the COVID-19 step and symptom extraction, the information extraction problem as the baseline, and all the demoed pipelines. But we are also having team members on or working on the long COVID symptoms, the aging conditions, and also adverse events. So once that's maybe we can stay on this. So once that is available, so that means you will have a readily used NLP algorithms. So we are so the rule set can currently you can develop everything online and download the resources as a zip file, which is also editable, and deploy it into the MetaGram instance. And we also have the OHMP backbone, which is more end-to-end framework that can ingest the data from the institution's EHR system and write out the results onto the OMO CDM database. Specifically, we will read the data from the node table and write the results to the node NLP table. And once the data is written and the concept extraction are done, so you will have the node NLP table written, and the phenotype group, which Emily will present later, they also have a extraction script so that all the data fields with the concerns of the PHI will be erased. So we will only keep the metadata and the extracted NLP concepts, which are basically the coded from resource space. And those tables will be prepared and be ready to be uploaded to N3C Enclave. So the current development is mainly focused on the original PMI tagger. And we are also developing the Elasticsearch instance so that all the extracted concepts can be searchable with the contextual information, temporal information, and subjects and negations, so on and so forth. Of course, the whole workflow currently is we are working on the meta tagger implementation, but can also be engineered towards other NLP systems. So yeah, thank you. I think we can go to the next slide. Yeah, so here's a demo of the rule editor. So probably we can just keep the link, and for this user interface. So it basically it's a demo COVID-19 symptoms and symptoms rule set, which you can directly modify on it, and also we have a test button so that you can see if given an arbitrary string or part of the documents, so what will be the concepts extracted. So the terms will be highlighted and provided with all the normalized names and all the contextual information demonstrated before. So currently the user interface is more like you need to upload the rule sets and download once the work is done. And we are actively, actually we are developing a new middleware system so that after the user authentication, you can keep the all the information of your rule set with as a user to the user profile local space at the Enclave cloud. So currently the public facing the front end, the code is part of our OHLP GitHub repo, and the backend engine is hosted on the Enclave cloud. So we definitely have some expansion plan going on. So next slide. Yeah. So yeah, this is just a demo example of one of the concepts, which is stroke. Actually, yeah, so as you can see, so the terms will be highlighted, and if you are editing the rule set at the backend, so everything will be sent out to the backend server along with the test string and also the compiled rule set, and the results will stand back and rendered by the front end. So this is again, this is just a demonstration of how added phenotypes can be, or added concepts can be done as simple as just putting a few regular expressions or a few keywords there. So yeah, I don't think stroke is part of the overall general COVID-19 rule set. It's just a demonstration of what can you do to add a new concept here. So yeah, next slide. So yeah, this is a brief introduction of our current onboarding process. So we have used this process to onboard, I think, a few teams. So the first thing is, as long as you have some interest in this, you probably need to check with your technical team on what are the prerequisites, and if if that can be done in each institution. So the first thing to check is the data connection for the textual data. So make sure all the connecting data types and metadata and node types are available and be able to use for research purposes. And for different use case scenario, you also may need to check on if the say the data can be updated in real time or as a batch process within a certain period, because I believe the N3C Enclave do require some timely updated. So MAOV adopt a weekly updated process, and I think that's some requirement that we need to have in hand before considering contributing the data to. And also what will make things easier is existing database instances. So we do support a file system uploading, but it will be easier at a large scale when you are interested with the existing database instance, especially you're using the almost CDM the data storage. So the infrastructure-wise, we have several options. So I think one of the most popular option is to have a dedicated server to host the NLP engines, which are the working nodes that processing all the nodes. So we are also providing other options like the Google Cloud Platform and our Apache Spark, and I believe there are possibility for further extension if there's a need. So for the deployment, we do have an onboarding demo video to walk through the backbone software step by step, and I think it's about an hour long. And if you are particularly interested in some of the part, you can also listen through and to find if there is anything helpful. So if you got a review those and along with the instructions, and I think it's still a good idea to proceed, our N3C NLP team will be happy to have a discussion to basically go through the configurations from each from the participating site and make sure it's good to go. And what we observed is it typically takes 4 to 8 hours to set up, given the database and the data connections are readily available. So which can vary site by site significantly. So basically, the deployment it should be a straightforward process with the basic with the informative skill sets and the database experience. So next slide. With that being said, so I will give the presentation to Emily, who will be going through the submission logics once the NLP results get processed. So what will be the next step? So thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So we have worked closely with the Mayo team to figure out the best way to incorporate the NLP process and pipeline into the existing infrastructure that we already have for sites to submit data, because one of our sort of guiding principles is to make it as easy as possible for sites to submit data to N3C, and this is no exception. So the Phenotype team has already built a process to enable sites that are already submitting payloads to N3C to just add the NLP data to their existing feeds. There's a link on this slide to the wiki page that we added to our GitHub. And that really has all of the detail that you might need, in the weeds for actually making the submission. But we've also put together a flow diagram to show how one can incorporate the NLP process in with the rest of the work that a site does to submit data to N3C. And I'm going to talk through a couple of the steps in this flow diagram in the next couple of slides. So next slide, please. Oh, that text got very large, but that's fine. So the biggest challenge with NLP incorporation into the existing N3C data is that most sites, including my own, do not keep their note data in the same database as their CDM. And by CDM, I mean PCORNet, TriNetX, ACT, or OMOP. And it's great that OMOP supports note tables. That's been a really nice advantage for OMOP. But PCORNet, TriNetX, and ACT don't really support note data natively. You can sort of shoehorn it in there, but it's not the same as actually natively supporting it the way that OMOP does. And so we had to, because we support all 4 data models equally, we needed to find a way to enable those non-OMOP sites to be able to submit the OMOP formatted NLP data regardless. And so the ways that we are suggesting that sites do that is that even if you have a non-OMOP database, such as, I'll just use my site as an example, we're a PCORNet site. When we participate in the NLP aspect of N3C, we're going to create and populate the OMOP note tables inside our PCORNet CDM. So OMOP and PCORNet are going to live together in harmony, and it will only be the note tables that are OMOP formatted. But in order to make things talk to each other, and this is the harder part, we're going to have to implement ID crosswalks in order to make sure that the patient IDs that our site sends to N3C are the same in our PCORNet data as they are in our note tables. And the reason that gets quite complicated is because, as I mentioned, most sites store their notes in separate databases from their CDMs. And so on this slide, I have a representation of what that might look like, where in blue, you have your note table that contains the free text notes, maybe straight from your EHR. So for example, at my site, we just have our notes in the Epic Clarity database. And then in yellow, we have the N3C submission, where you're submitting your structured lab data to N3C. And you can see that the N3C patient ID is not the same as the note patient ID, even if they are for the same patient. And so we have put some instructions in that wiki for sites to construct one of these ID crosswalk tables in green that will allow the N3C submission to be able to translate between the native Epic or other EHR IDs that are attached to the notes and what is submitted to N3C. But this is not necessarily the easiest thing to do. It's certainly possible and we can do it, but we just want to reiterate that we are very happy to support sites in doing this because it's a little bit of SQL gymnastics, and we'd love to be able to support sites. Next slide, please. So once a participating site goes ahead and populates those note tables, and again, those are OMOP formatted note tables, we've actually added a new module that attaches to our standard extract scripts that all sites are already using. And that will add the NLP data to the site's regular N3C payload. So it will actually appear right in the same directory structure that the rest of your data goes into, and will just submit to N3C in the exact same way that you're submitting data today. That new module right now is built for Microsoft SQL Server, but as new sites come on that need other database flavors, we are very happy to translate that module to other database dialects as needed. So just ask. And I did want to reiterate that through this process, no actual free text note data will ever be sent as part of the N3C payload. We are only extracting through the scripts that we've written derived data and metadata that is free of any direct identifiers. So just wanted to reiterate that, and for peace of mind purposes. On the slide, I have a screenshot of our GitHub repo and to show you the new folder called NLP Extracts, which is where that new module lives. And documentation for how to use that new module can be found in the documentation for our Python and R N3C exporters. And on this slide, there are links directly to where you need to go in order to see that new documentation. So that's all I had, but if anyone has any questions about logistics for submitting NLP data, the Phenotype team and I are very happy to support you.
Great, well, thank you. So this was great. So one of the things I think would be kind of interesting to talk about as we sort of move into the period where we're going to be launching or are launching various long COVID task sorts of projects is to sort of talk to people about the process that they might go through if they have a particular set of phenotypes that they want to extract, how they can use the tools that N3C offers to do that. Maybe could Hongfang or Emily or anybody sort of just bottom line, you've got a group with, you know, moderate informatics sophistication who is interested in a scientific question where they want to get NLP extraction for phenotypes that hadn't been really extracted before.
Yeah, currently we are working with the Peter Robson's HPO team. They have a wonderful they enhance the HPO with non-COVID science symptoms, as well as layperson language, as well as synonym lists. So we're getting a baseline system for long COVID science symptoms into the NLP baseline as a baseline system currently. Hopefully pretty soon we can have that released to the community, so we can, when you run this NLP process, you have those sign symptoms, long COVID related phenotype to be extracted from the text to be used for the community. So it's a collaboration, yeah.
So the process of that, so then it sounds like you're suggesting that people actually contact you, or that we have some sort of a mechanism, sort of N3C wide, to make sure that we're aggregating the concepts that need to be extracted so that your group knows about them.
Right. So basically, the terms, so existing long COVID sign symptoms that have been curated by HPO team, the HPO ontology team. So we're working with that team currently, be able, we'll be able to have the long COVID sign symptoms extracted from clinical documents to be part of the NLP rules to be running through the NLP process. So if more sites deploy the text analysis infrastructure, deploy the what we describe here, you would be able to get those long COVID information concepts to be available through N3C datasets, Enclave.
Great. So it sounds like one of the things that might be really useful is we first have our long COVID group, domain team, and then various subdomain teams. So then it's basically people who are interested in particular topics should interact with that. And what we probably need to do is a slightly more intentional way, because we're putting together documents describing long COVID phenotype, but I think people may not be aware that sort of jumping into that and adding their phenotypes is actually going to be very important from the NLP point of view, because otherwise you may not know about, because long COVID manifests itself in many ways and it may not be completely obvious. So then you're suggesting that essentially working with a long COVID phenotype group, making sure that these are documented, and then your group would work to get the NLP extraction.
Right, because we also need to ensure interoperability.
No, that's great. No, I think this is just a great discussion to have, because so we're all on the same page. So another question I have involves validation. So you have a bunch of rules, and this is particularly, I think, relevant if we're sort of doing a rapid expansion of what you're trying to extract. Because if it's hypertension, the NLP, medical NLP community has been validating that stuff for decades. But if it's an unusual cognitive long COVID symptom, validation may be a non-trivial thing. So what are your thoughts, or what are anybody's thoughts? You build a rule, but you run it across lots of independent sites. How are we going to validate this stuff?
So that's actually, to me, this is come to phenotyping, and this come to how N3C data will bring value to this whole thing, because that's a novel discovery mining effort in general. Because what we do, what I notice is that when we look at long COVID signs symptoms, as soon as these things mentioned, then start to see document about it. But the things, if it's still novel, nobody knows about it, it's not appear in the documentation at all.
Right.
Yeah, so there is a latency related to what we can find from the clinical documents regarding the long COVID sign symptoms, as well as those novel ones. So you probably should not expect the novel ones to be appearing in the documents, because the only time they started to document is when they notice when these things appear to be considered to be a non-COVID sign symptoms.
Well, that may or may not be true. I don't know. I mean, that's a hypothesis.
Right.
But if it's salient enough to the patient, it may well be.
Yeah, we do on our local sites, we do have expert panels to discuss long COVID sign symptoms, and can validate that through the clinical investigation expert panel, rather than us discovering from the data. We will discover from the data in some way, but that's require expert panel validation.
Great. Okay, anybody other thoughts?
Andrew.
Yeah, this is Andrew Williams. So I just want to heartily endorse the efforts that Hongfang, Xijia, and Emily and everybody have put forth here. We've piloted at our site, and I think it's just a really excellent realization of the promise of N3C to have this really top flight NLP backbone made available very easily for any site that wants to contribute data and to contribute rules to the library of rule sets and have it be a growing resource for the entire community. And then Hongfang, I was wondering, it's a little bit related to what Joel was saying, but I think benchmarking, once you start to get more contributors, holds a tremendous promise as well. So mostly I just want to endorse the entire effort and say I think it's really a signal achievement of N3C, and everyone ought to really investigate it, because the effort required to take advantage of it is really small, and you're getting the results of lots of expert help to do this. So I wanted to re-emphasize that, but also ask if you could comment a little bit on the role of benchmarking.
Right. So we do, so the benchmarking has come to what we call annotation, gold standard creation. This has come to what we call concept definition and task formulation. So this is a whole set of what we call require guideline development and corpus gold standard creation. So there is a parallel effort to that, which is we are working with multiple sites to creating benchmarking data sets, so we can see what type of algorithm can be bring to this platform to disseminate across the sites. So we NLP itself is kind of say you must have a training data. You have a task that itself is natural language processing. It's the AI task we generally view. In order to extract some concepts correctly, besides expert knowledge, you also try to see how good it is performed across multi-site corpus. But that multi-site corpus require some process of sharing if the data can be shared. If not, actually use the federated evaluation framework in the kind of federated evaluation framework we are working on, so that we can bring the best NLP algorithm forward, which evaluate across different sites data. But this is all come to chicken and egg things. We want to capture the emerging concepts mentions in the documents. We also want to ensure, the performance of the system is benchmarked with the performance measures. And we also want the clinical NLP community to leverage to contribute here to benchmarking their state-of-the-art algorithm methods. So we try to emphasize benchmarking is so crucial. Benchmarking and the infrastructure to us is a different thing, and we separated the text analysis infrastructure from the algorithm development because that's two different process. We can have a baseline raw system running, but at the end, what we want to put to the community is NLP algorithm benchmarked, NLP models benchmarked across multi-sites with performance metrics. So when you use the data, you have some confidence in the data. Yeah.
No, that's fantastic. That's great. That's a great description. And I actually want to echo what Andrew said, because as you know, as I'd mentioned before, we've gone through the process as well. And I think it's clearly something that is the next step and is really not that hard to do. So if we could get most N3C sites generating NLP and submitting it to the Enclave would be fantastic. And it's really quite easy to do.
Yeah, we are so fortunate. I mean, to have a conversation with the Trinex, and there's a potential Trinex will be having this in their appliance to help the sites running this and submit that.
And I guess really just in a bigger sense, which maybe people don't think about that much, just getting up from being down in the weeds. Each site has a tremendous amount of really important information that is not easily sent legally to an Enclave because it has PHI. And the sort of high-level notion of creating and customizing algorithms that capture the key clinical phenotypes from the different sites and then forward that in the form of new discrete data elements in a controlled vocabulary is an incredibly powerful thing, because I think many people sort of stop at the point where they say, well, look, we've got the discrete data elements from an electronic health record, but we have billing codes and we have labs and we have meds, and those are all really important things, but many of the qualitative features get left out. And so NLP, as well as other actually forms of analyses, sensor and waveform and image, are all additional forms of analysis that I think actually our consortium is increasingly enabling sort of integrative analysis. So I think you guys have done a fantastic job. So
community effort. I think like Andrew Williams and you and Emily, try out and give feedback and then help us test it. That's wonderful team effort.
Right. Well, thanks everybody. So other comments? Let's see. We should look at the chat, see if there are any questions. We have linked to the NLP sandbox. Let's see. Are you Michelle Morris to panelists? Are you asking the validation that it is picking up the new rules properly? Is that? We have a comment. So let's see. Validation that it is at. Are you asking the validation that is picking up the new rules properly? So I think that relates to validation, which I think you've covered. Okay. Well, I think this is great. So any other comments or thoughts? Okay, thanks for the update. I'll be interested to know if context captured only in text can be validated somehow. From Jimmy Fong. Hongfang or Emily? Hello? Hongfang, I think you're muted.
Yeah, I'm here. I opened the chat and it's so big. I did lost my window. Yes, the contextual resource is optimized for mail logo data, but the contextual is also a pattern-based approach. So we do invite local sites to adapt that so it captures the contextual information accurately. So far, we see good performance on our local sites and the size, and the piece which we notice, if it's natural language, it captures pretty well. If it's a template text, like the forms, it does not do well.
And I think Richard Moffat says to panelists, the sites themselves could validate their own results, which I totally agree. I think that's I think an interesting and important point that if one were to set up a sort of a template for local validation. I mean, because at some level, this is actually something Hongfang, we're doing with your install. Is we're validating locally. But I think that's a really good point, that would be something that we could do in a very nicely organized way to have sites do that, because obviously there's certain sorts of validations where frankly, you got to look at the text, you got to look at the note, and only people at the sites are allowed to look at the note. So there's certain sorts of validation that you really don't know unless somebody at the site is doing it. Yeah, I want to answer the question because the questionnaire data, those type of things, which is a template, then they answer yes or no, or they use their local terms to define local values to fill those template structured, semi-structured data. And those actually have a local contextual information, which is missing from our current release, which is more fit for the natural language context type of contextual rules. I believe your contextual means the negations, the certainty modifiers, right?
Regarding local validation, one of the things we're doing, and I think a lot of sites could do if they adopted this, is we probably, like many sites, had hand abstracted data, but as COVID progressed, there was all kinds of efforts to get data through manual abstraction by experts, entirely separate efforts having nothing to do with N3C, but we can point the NLP pipeline at those same sources and use that data that's already been hand abstracted as as the standard on which to measure things. And I imagine many sites have a similar setup and could do something similarly without a lot of extra effort.
Yeah, I love that idea. And actually, so we have something on the order of 1,300 patients during the first few months of the pandemic. And actually, Mary Saltz led too numerous to count medical students and fellows doing hand abstraction. And we're actually doing some validation, but Andrew, I think that's a great idea to make this more systematic, because I'm sure, quite a large number of sites have done that. And, doing that explicitly as an NLP validation exercise would be incredibly time consuming and expensive, but we actually have a lot of that. That's a really good point. I think that, so Hongfang, what do you think? I mean, I think that would actually be a really worthwhile community effort to sort of poll and see who has hand abstracted data. And one of the things that's tricky, and we actually had our clinical informatics fellows look at this, is the definitions are obviously not the same. I mean, they're pretty close. I mean, because by April, the sort of main hallmarks of COVID were pretty well known, but they were phrased somewhat differently. So it's not an exact match to the clinical phenotype definitions you have. Right? So,
Yeah, so we are following the HPO, the ALBO foundry side of the definition, using that standards to help us define those clinical concepts. It may be, this is come to how important the standards would be when you have multi-site network-wide activities. When we call something as something, that needs to be consistent, defined across in order to use the data for the analysis. Otherwise, it's not comparable. So,
right. No, it's a lot of interesting issues, and obviously, as we move forward with long COVID and past, the collection of potential phenotypes and symptoms is broader, so this becomes even more of a challenge. So there is an interesting, very interesting community effort involved here. So
yeah. I think it's wonderful. I think the Peter Robson team, they did a wonderful work of doing the review of the past sign symptoms, which we can leverage right away, but we do probably need a community effort to identify novel past sign symptoms. And then we started to have this and screen and check, and then we have, we can leverage that for the research purpose. So.
At the risk of being a little too much of a cheerleader, I think it's a tremendously valuable tool for this novel discovery. I think it's also worth emphasizing for sites that are considering this, that you just get a tremendous amount of data, even for things that aren't novel, that you aren't really doing the discovery. So when we implemented Hongfang's system, we just, we compared what we'd already gotten through coded data on the same patients to the new data that wasn't redundant from the NLP system, and it's just a tremendous gain. So I think you're buying a very large effort. So the pie chart that Hongfang showed about the amount that it matters is one motivating factor, but also just the sheer addition of useful data that's you're missing otherwise is a really should be a potent motivator.
all right, well, I think we're at time, and I want to thank the speakers and everybody for really a great discussion, and look forward to this continuing in the future. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.